Okay, so here's the claim. And there's actually people who do this professionally, by the way. They analyze businesses and other organizations by these strategies. And these are often these people, they call themselves diversity consultants, for example. Okay, so here's the claim. Imagine that you take a hierarchy of some sort, like a law firm, a big law firm. Then what you do is you analyze the hierarchical structure of the law firm. Then you break down the representation of the people in the law firm by their identity categories. So how many men, how many women, how many transsexuals. But then you don't stop there, eh? And this is actually part of the technical problem with the approach. You divide them by race. You divide them by ethnicity. You divide them by sexual identity. Okay, so imagine there we've got 6 categories already, 6 or 7 categories. Now, of course, obviously race is further divisible, as is ethnicity, as are such things as attractiveness, right? So there's all sorts of ways of dividing people into groups axiomatically, and there's no self-evident way of determining which of those group divisions should be superordinate. And that's partly how the leftists, the radical leftists, can keep gerrymandering the game, because they can just keep playing games with the group categories. In any case, you take the organization, you take the bottom hierarchy and you say, the bottom rung, and you say, okay, well, is it 50% men and 50% women? And if the answer to that is no, then you make the claim that the reason for that is because of systemic oppression and prejudice. Oppression, prejudice, bigotry, and usually misogyny. Then you make the case that the people who are organizing the organization are bigoted and misogynist, even if it's not consciously, unconsciously, so that's the unconscious bias aspect. Then you put forward a plan that can include quotas, and increasingly will be, to ensure that that hierarchical level is now equal in proportional representation to the population itself. Now, of course, conveniently, you also get to determine which population you're going to compare it to, because that's one of the ways that you get to keep the power when you're doing this. You get to decide which groups people are going to be identified with, even though there's a near infinite number of ways people could be divided into groups, and you get to decide which population you're going to compare it to. So you can keep everybody unstable and off kilter permanently with that sort of approach. Well, then you go into the organization and you make anti-unconscious bias training, for which there is zero for the utility of which there is zero evidence for the utility of that intervention from a scientific perspective. In fact, some of the scientific evidence suggests that if you make unconscious bias training mandatory, you make prejudice worse. And maybe that's because people don't like to be called bigots and misogynists and to be put through retraining in a mandatory way. Okay, so then you do that in analysis at each rung of the organization. Now, you might say, well, why do you do that? Well, the putative reason is equity. Now, equity and equality of opportunity are not the same thing. If you hear someone utter the word equity, either they don't know what they're talking about and they're ignorant beyond they're ignorant in a manner that makes it inappropriate for them to engage in a conversation about it, or they are the enemy of anyone who holds the tenets of individuality dear. Because equity means equality of outcome. And so the real postmodern radicals are using community to mean equity, and equity to mean equality of outcome. And so then they get to divide up the groups into whatever groups they feel are the groups that people should be divided into now. And then they get to go make their claims of oppression and misogyny and bigotry and all of that. And one of the huge advantages that accrues to them in doing that, and since it's all about power, is power. And that's the game that's being played out. And that's happening unbelievably quickly. The equity issue is something it's absolutely unbelievable to me how rapidly people have started to talk about equity and to actually think that that's a reasonable goal. Now, the alternative is to let people sort themselves out more or less in a free market manner, allowing for the possibility that there are genuine differences between people in intelligence, temperament, and interest. and the notion that those things differ, and that a tremendous amount of that difference is a consequence of biological, underlying biological reality, is overwhelming. And the humanities types, the postmodernist types, they know they've lost the scientific battle over this. The whole idea that people are a blank slate, and that everyone's equal at birth, and that everything that makes people differ is a consequence of socialization, that bloody idea has been dead among anybody who's reasonably educated as a scientist. That's been dead since, I would say, mid-60s. Dead. It's not, no one even talks about it. But among these postmodernist types, man, they don't give a damn for facts. In fact, facts for them are merely whatever the current power hierarchy uses to justify their acquisition of power.